Hey everyone, and welcome to Sarawak. So, in one of my last videos, I made a router sled, and part of that was using some 8mm stainless steel rod. And I had to make a circle cutting jig to cut out a circle for a tabletop. And I got to thinking about how all of the normal circle cutting jigs for routers you find on YouTube follow this same design that is not particularly adjustable from the end that you want to adjust it at. Most of them you can adjust it only from the middle and you slide the router back and forth, but you don't want to adjust it from the middle, you want to adjust it from the far end. So I took some of those 8mm steel rods and made my own circle cutting jig. The first thing you'll need to do is cut some gaps in the side of the wood to allow for the rods to be inserted. Doesn't really matter how deep or how far, as long as there's going to be enough grip for the epoxy. You can scuff up the outside of the rod a bit, as that will help the epoxy to grab onto the rod. I just made a tape barricade here. There's probably nicer and cleaner ways of doing it, but this was what I came up with at the time, just to run a dam of tape around the outside and fill it with epoxy. It did actually work fairly well, but it was a bit messy at the end, and I had to scrape a lot of it down so that it was flat and level and looked a bit nicer at the end. So I measured this one out to 4 feet, which will give you a radius of 4 feet, or a maximum circle size of 8 feet. And I did that because I was thinking, well, what if I needed to make an arc of 8 feet? But really, I don't think that's going to be very common, and maybe I'll have to use it to make an arc at the end of a table or something, but really you could get by with making this to only do a maximum size of 4 to 5 feet. So you'd only need to make it 3 feet long. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Should do it 2, I guess. 8765432 feet. So to make my circle block, I used a bit of hardwood that I had lying around and cut it out using the same size hole cutter. But if you're going to do that, you'll need to shim the hole because the thickness of the hole saw is going to leave about a 2mm gap around the outside between the block and the circle cutting jig. So you'll either need to shim it with something, and I just 3D printed a part, or you cut it with the next size up hole saw, and that's probably the easiest way of doing it. So you can see there the little plastic shim that I put in there. It was just about a 1.8mm thick piece of plastic that I ran through it, and it did the job admirably. The benefit to this one is that while you can do the large adjustments through here with the block, you do finer adjustments by using the attachment to the router up this end. So you can get, there's about a 1/2 foot travel, so you can hit anywhere within that 1/2 foot for your router. So each one of these goes up a 1/2 foot, meaning that it'll adjust the size of the circle by 1 foot for each 1/2 foot spacing, and the same goes for up here. So you can make any sized circle you want, particularly if you have a very specific table size need. But as I said, the benefit is you drop it where you want it to be, and then you make the fine adjustments at this end rather than having to go back to the center, unscrew, move, walk back to the other side, check it, go to the center, move it, and adjust back and forth until you get it right. This one, you drop it in the middle and you make the fine adjustments where you can see that the router just touches the edge. And that'll give you the biggest circle that you can get on the board without having to keep going back and forth to the center of the jig. So, I'm going to show you how you make this. The benefit to this being, if you want to do the underside of the table, you can just screw it in, but if you're doing it on the surface of the table and you don't want to put a drill hole in, then you just, with some CA glue, glue the block down in the middle. And then at the end, the block will come off. So you can either fix it in with a screw or just glue the block to the top of the workpiece and not have to worry about putting a hole in the middle of the table.